for resource officers last year was less than what I budgeted. So that explains part of the savings in there, and some of it was a reshuffling of the copier cost expenses, the cost per page. We negotiated a new contract with a different vendor, and we did experience some savings. It just didn't come out in the same spots that I had originally budgeted, but that was, we knew that again would happen until we had a year's worth under our belt with the new equipment. I think the good thing to note is that in my explanation under large equipment, we had a $14,000 savings, and that was due almost entirely to negotiating that new copier agreement and changing out all the equipment so that we were more efficient in our cost per copies. So therefore, adding a little savings in some of the cost centers. As I talked about most of the year, I knew we'd have some savings in energy based on how the weather was progressing. The conservation efforts by all the district staff, particularly the maintenance and custodial staff, and a great majority of this actually is at the high school, and we have taken a number of years to get that adjusted so that things are working properly, but as you can see, we did have those savings. Part of that's good weather, and part of that it was favorable pricing in the natural gas market, and near the end of the year, the change in the cost per kilowatt hour of the electricity with that other agreement. And again, I did adjust next year's budget accordingly, so we're not going to see that next year. Hopefully we'll see some, but there's a little bit in there that'll depend upon weather more than anything else. Student transportation, we had some savings in student transportation, mainly due to two reasons. One is the fact that the first year we had to take over a lot of the homeless transportation when the McKinney-Vento law changed or came into being, and so we budgeted a certain amount based on what we thought the trends were, and over a period of time we did not experience as much expense in the homeless transportation aspects because not only because we've become more efficient, but I think probably it slowed down a little bit. But again, that's one of those things that's dependent on the economy, and we absolutely have no control over that. If they show up and and are homeless, then we are bound by federal law federal statute to follow through on certain aid areas. That student transportation is one of them. So this was a good year. I don't know what will happen in 2010. We'll just keep our fingers crossed and hope we can do as well. In the central office, we had some savings because we had originally thought that the superintendent search, all of that money would come out of the school budget, and you were able to negotiate with the city council to get some funding for that search. I mentioned the large equipment, and we've been working diligently on trying to maximize the savings in our telephone costs, not only in equipment but in service. And we did have some property and liability decreases based on some efforts that we have made working with Primex, which is the pool that we belong to for our property and liability and workers' comp insurance. And I'll have a little more details on that later because there is I believe, there is an old business action item that addresses that specifically. So that's the overview at this stage of the game. Again, on auditors, as I indicated, all this will be reviewed by the auditors during the September timeframe, and usually around the change of the year we get some information back through the city. But if there are issues that come up, normally they let me know ahead of time and I can give you an update. But I believe that everything that we've done is well within the parameters that they set forth for us. In terms of Cost Center 207, for the FY 2009 expenditures and revenues, as you can see, we actually, with the retro applied to that, we actually had a slight cost overrun on there, but fortunately for us, with the hard work of the special ed department and Marge Achilles, we have still stayed on top of the Medicaid reimbursement situation and tried to maximize that as best we can. within the rules as allowed. And we also did have, as I mentioned in last meeting, in the superintendent's report, he included a letter that indicated that unbeknownst to us, there was some error money associated with Medicaid, which we became eligible for. So combined with those two, we actually had extra revenue, which more than offset the over expenditure. So that means that we have a slight fund balance to carry into next year to try to, stay up with that program. Basically, that's in a nutshell. I can entertain specific questions if you have any.
Okay.
And do my best to answer them, or come back at a future date with an answer if I can't do it on the spot.
Okay. Sherry?
So at the top of the page 3 that you pointed out before, the 12,417, which you said we could use towards, 9C in our future part of the agenda this evening. So is that our actual, is that where we end up at the end of the year? So we'll only have like $3,000 or $4,000
To give back to the city.
to give back to the city? Is that where, okay, so that's where we
Correct.
stand there.
Yep.
And then my other question is, the 400,000 that we use to offset, do we ever see how that's moved about to cover, like how is that used? Because you said we were going to have to use all of that to
Yes.
cover.
Yeah. Originally, right up until May, there was no reason to believe that we would do anything but just barely break even in that cost center. The Medicaid revenues are very difficult to predict because we collect them through a third party from our staff and then submit them to the state, and then they come back. It's a process we're trying to refine the estimates as best we can, but it is kind of difficult. So if it hadn't been for the extra air money, we were very close, so I felt pretty comfortable that we were there. The 400,000 just goes over to 207. It's a transfer from expense in 165, cost center 165, and goes straight to our revenue in cost center 207. So if you look at cost center 207 on the third page, you will see general fund support, 400,000, and that's where that transfer was made.
Okay, so is that total revenue then? Are we the 40,000 under?
No, we're 40,000 over.
Okay, so that's 40,000 over.
Right. A red number on the revenue to plan, year-to-date to plan is good.
Okay, so
black
that one's
number would
good,
be
and the
bad.
black number up top, though, is good. The 12,417 was good.
And that's
in
good, because
black.
that means, yeah, if it was red, that would not be good. That's
Okay,
correct.
so we have two good numbers
Yes.
on both of those.
Yes, we do.
Okay, and then my last comment is the energy savings that you have listed
Mm-hmm.
on our summary page, which I know, thank God we did have, because it's used to cover many other things this year, and you said you did the budget therefore next year lower, take that amount out, but yet we have consistently said that our cost savings in energy is what we were using to get to our zero budget given to the city, thinking there's going to be this $100,000 some odd dollars that we were going to use as savings. So do you still see whatever number we've put into the 2010 budget, that we're going to come in $100,000 less than that number?
No, I don't believe we will, because if we saved 140,000 this year under favorable conditions, if we were to meet the same favorable conditions next year, reducing that budgeted number by 110 means the best we do would be 30,000.
Exactly. Okay, so I think our administration on getting to our zero budget that we chopped 100,000 out of energy for to get there is them doing something different.
Right. I mean, every year, this, I think, is what, my fourth year, I lose track, to tell you the truth. It's just that, I try to refine and get closer and closer with the information we have. And so far, the past couple of years, we've gotten better and better. You get to a point where you can't get any better. And, so you're sort of, my analogy is you're sort of flying without a net. To fall back on. So we'll just hope I don't land on the ground next year. That's all, I guess. We have to cut it close. It's a political reality to get budgets passed that you have to get it as close as you can, and We do the best we can that far ahead. The first day of school, a lot of these things will change. A lot of our estimates will go right out the window on the specific line items they are, but we're hoping that overall, that we will, be able to net out, where we need to be. And that's what I work hard to do every year.
Yes, you do. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? See, Patrick.
More a comment than a question. The maintenance budget sticks out like a sore thumb to me. I'm looking at the actual from 2008 of 469,000, almost 470. This is at the bottom of page 2. And our budget of 397 this year, and lo and behold, our actual is pretty close to what we spent the year before. And recollection is that we once again flatlined that budget item for next year. It seems as if there's I can only see two data points here, but a trend that it's much higher than what we're budgeting for, and it concerns me a little bit. We talked about it a little bit during our budget conversations. Both this and the operating budget don't seem to change despite increased pressures on both of those line items. I guess I'll just flag it as a concern of mine that we are unable to do the preventative maintenance items that our buildings need to avoid larger cost expenditures down the road.
That is a concern I share as well. I'm not going to try to kid anybody. That's always an area of concern. Although I will say that, as we mentioned the other night, that we did have some considerable expense this year based on investigations and work that we did on the middle school to go forward, and that throughout the year. I mean, that was probably in the ballpark of about $25,000, which we didn't plan on, but based on the fact that it had to be done, I look at it that if there is a safety concern, if it involves student health and safety, then you pay me to make sure that we exercise due diligence. That's what I did. Fortunately, everything came together and we were able to do it. It just means that next year, as I move things around, we may be tighter on some other areas. But every year I try to do this so that whatever I can do in the current year minimizes any negative impact on future years. And so this reflects that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ann.
Steve, I remember asking you to put a list together of all the middle school expenditures, which you gave us last year, which, when you look at that sheet, I don't have it with me tonight, but I remember at the time we received it, forgetting all the little things that were happening, not they were so little, but they were costly all along the way, and those are things that we need to eliminate.
And building a new
With our
school
new
would
school,
do
of
that.
course.
Correct, I know.
Exactly. And so when you look at those extra things, it really was a considerable list. I want to pull mine out again.
Stephen, I have one question. Just so I understand, and this goes back to the conversation, which I believe you mentioned I think the other day also, about the surplus plan with the city?
Yes. Okay.
Which takes effect next year. It's not this current year.
Do you want, or you've got more?
Well, I guess my question is if you could talk a little bit about that, a little more about that, so we're clear that we have it. And the other thing would be, so for example, with these extra savings, which I added up, so it's a little over $200 and some odd thousand. So if we didn't have to cover that, the retro, which we won't have to do next year, so if we were to end up with about $200,000 in surplus, for example, so we would have the ability to have it in a fund to spend on technology specifically? So
It's still, I'll have to say it's a work in process still. You had asked me, or someone had, I think it was Dexter that had asked that we pursue that with the city manager. And in a meeting before Superintendent McDonough started, I initiated that conversation with the former superintendent and the city manager. And we were able to do that because at a work session, he had made the statement that he would consider some sort of a fund he mentioned textbooks was the example he used that night, if my memory serves me correctly. So at a subsequent meeting, we discussed that with him, and the idea was that he was still thinking about it. He still thought it was a reasonable idea. We had to be careful in terms of how it would fit in with other departments and how it would fit in with the auditors. And then in the subsequent meeting after July 1st, I'm trying to get acclimated with the new superintendent, going through and looking at various things. He had mentioned that he had, in fact, had a meeting with the city manager, and so I asked, how did we do on the thing? And the response that I got, and please, Mr. McDonough, if I misspeak, please straighten me out, but my recollection was that John said that he would agree to help us pursue it, but that it would be in effect for any savings we had in the 2010 fiscal year for use in 2011.
Right, and I think that's accurate. And the gist of it was, theoretically, the books had closed in June. And looking forward, it had to meet a certain test of the auditor. So it would be up to the school committee ultimately whether this was a capital reserve fund for technology. And then, i.e., you would have to meet certain thresholds. I mean, it would have to be equipment with a useful life of X number of years and equipment that had a value of X, i.e., 5,000 or something. Textbooks probably wouldn't meet that threshold and be appropriate. But it could also be capital reserve for maintenance, projects, capital improvement projects, et cetera. So that would be a determination the board could wrestle with and make it and decide. But any surplus funds, we essentially had an agreement that they could move forward next year in a capital reserve fund.
For the following year.
Right.
And of course,
So whatever money saved when we're closing the books in FY10 can be applied as a reserve in FY11.
subject to review by the auditors. I think he qualified all his statements with that statement, which is, I mean, we have to meet the standards because there's certain criterion. The city of Portsmouth, through the hard work of, the city finance department, enjoys a very good bond rating and all kinds of things which are all predicated by how, we conduct our business. And so certainly we would have to keep that in mind with anything that we move forward because, again, we are a department of the city. So.
Yeah, so this is actually all good news. Okay, anything else on the June financial report? Okay, moving on.
Okay, thank you. Item number 2 is I have been asked to try to at least come up with an order of magnitude estimate as to what the change that the retirement system told us about the day before we ran our first payroll this year. And it appears at this stage of the game, and I'll be able to refine it probably to a little closer for next month. But right now, based on trying to get everything in and the new rates and stuff, it looks like it's in the neighborhood of $100,000 impact. So again, there's one other thing that I'm going to have to try to juggle around to cover between now and the end of the year. So I've got my work cut out for me.
So in other words, with this new rate increase, we're starting the year off at a $100,000 deficit.
That's correct. I wouldn't use the word deficit
Okay.
yet because the deficit
It's at the end of the year.
is at the end of the year.
Right.
I would say that we are anticipating a $100,000 cost overrun in a specific line, which we hope to be able to make up in some other lines.
That's what I meant to say.
I knew that. I knew that. I was just trying to be helpful.
Thank you.
So just to put that order of magnitude, Steve, how much did we budget for that line item? I mean, if I'm looking at the.
We budget
report, it was
$100,000 less.
Right.
But,
it
I
was-
mean,
The line item's about 1.2 million.
if it's, let's see,
If it's about ballpark to 2009 budget, this is a retirement state line.
yeah, I would have to,
231.
I actually would have to look at the new run. And the reason I say that is because, as I pointed out earlier, this retirement state number here, the budget, was actually overstated slightly because of the miscalculation on the sick leave at term by attributing the benefits to half that fund when we didn't need to. So if we were to, so I'd have to actually go back and look at what it is because it would be based on that correction, but also based on the rates that would be in effect this year, which are not reflected here. And because it's just not a straight 3.14, say, it would be hard for me to give you a number tonight that means
If you,
anything.
when you get it, if you
But
shoot for
but
that.
it will be obvious on the July financial.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone else? Any other questions? Is that it for you?
But that's all I have under that section.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to old business. So we have an update on the middle school. I guess if you'd like to talk about it as well. But I think last night was the update on the middle school, which was the public hearing, which had a very good turnout. It was, as the mayor said, it was a very civil conversation. I don't know, some people kept track of the numbers of people who spoke. Anybody have anything? Huh?
We actually had, I believe, it was 26, because we had 18 yes, 1 maybe, and 8 no.
Okay.
That come out to 26.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think all in all, it was a great session. The architects did a nice job summarizing. Do you have anything you wanted to say about it?
No, I think Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Zadrick, and I were talking based on some conversation. We're going to get back to JCJ and talk about some of the issues like the parking with the renovation, et cetera, and what some options are. So there's some further exploration on a few minor details, but we're going to work with the architects over the next few days, and so they'll be able to address some questions. And I've asked the city manager, if appropriate, if we can get some feedback, some of the questions ahead of time, so that they might be better prepared to answer any
It's a great
questions
idea.
folks have. Very good. So we'll hopefully facilitate that and
Okay.
see what happens next Monday.
Okay. It's hard to say, it's hard to predict in my crystal ball. But I feel a little more confident today than I did yesterday after last night's commentary. So we'll see how it goes. Okay. Consideration and approval of bus contract.
Okay, we can do that one.
Extension.
It wasn't in your packet, but it was at your at your place. There should be a sheet, which is merely a reiteration of the sheet we had the last time, and some handwritten piece. The fellow that I'm working with has been on vacation, and to get back and try to get everything done and out, he was unable to provide me with a fully modified letter. But here's the gist of it. The last time we talked about this, the 2-year extension was at a 4% increase for each of the following 2 years. That still remains the same. But there was some concern about the fuel clause, and I was asked to pursue one that went both ways. So I've, based on a phone conversation late this afternoon, the overage at $2.50 per gallon net of any state and federal taxes would be the same as proposed in the original proposal. However, if the cost net of those taxes is under $2.25, then we would receive a credit. And this actually is for B5 biodiesel, which was the other, I think the other area of concern. So I think based on the areas concerned the first 2 times, being able to benefit from the change in fuel prices and to be able to at least get B5 to start forward on our biodiesel for the sustainability, I believe we have accomplished that with this particular offer. So I would ask that tonight that you would approve this so that we can move forward, because school's starting pretty soon.
Okay. So could we have a motion to approve the bus contract extension?
I'll make a motion that we accept the proposal for the 2-year extension on the district transportation.
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Rebecca?
What happens if it's $2.32? If it's over $2.50, we pay. If it's under $2.25, what happens if it's in between?
It's in between, it's no harm, no foul.
Okay.
Which is, from my experience, pretty standard to have.
Usually you have a range. It's not
Okay.
one point where you go. It's usually a range in the middle, because there is fluctuation. And I actually spent some time online today to double check prices from the EPA price list, and currently B5 for for the April report, because they do it quarterly, was at 228, and that included taxes. So, I think there's hope for both sides here.
This is an extension, so this is the same bus company that we were.
That's correct.
dealing
This
with.
is an extension at this point in time, and I think as I recall, as I mentioned back when we first discussed this, which I think was January, February perhaps, my goal would be that in the next budget cycle, that I would put in some money to set aside for a transportation consultant to try to, because the field of competition has become so narrow now. In some cases, you need a transportation consultant to be able to help you put together all the pieces so that you can at least take advantage of anything in negotiations, which it ends up being somewhat tricky if you don't have the right support.
But you did talk them down considerably from
Yes.
the original.
Yeah, the original, I don't even remember what it was, but
was huge.
It was huge, and it was certainly a lot more than I was willing to swallow, so,
So, good job.
thank you.
Patrick?
I'll support the motion. I'm very happy to see us get the potential benefit. I mean, we can always keep our fingers crossed that fuel prices drop. I'll just flag, and it's the same thing that we talked about in February, that the 4% adjustment the next 2 years, when inflation is essentially running zero, is going to put more burden on us, knowing that times are tough and what our budget cycle is like this time. It's going to be equally tough next time. I look forward to the transportation study so that next time around on a brand-new contract, potentially, we're hopefully being able to hold our prices in line a bit more.
And if I may comment, on that, I did do some research with other districts, and 4% is pretty much the going rate for this next couple of years for more than one vendor. So it's not. I know we're not totally happy with it, but it's within line with what is out there. So we'll just try harder next time.
And so one quick question then. So at the end of this extension, which is the extension of the previous contract, that contract is done, and then we renegotiate from scratch?
We would actually RFP it or bid it,
Okay.
or whatever we work out with the consultant. I do know that at one of my organization meetings, the New Hampshire ASBO last year, we did have one of the consultants come and give us some tips on, obviously here's what I can do for you, but here's some of the things you can do on your own type stuff. And in some cases, because we're so small in New England compared to some of the other bigger states, we're better off sometimes, instead of putting it out to bid with not many people to bid on it, to work on some sort of a negotiation or RFP situation. It really depends upon the size of the area, the condition of that particular industry and business in your area, as to how well you can do with either, with any of those three choices. So we'll just cross that bridge when we come to it. But I think we need to budget some money to do it appropriately.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table and a second, and since it's a contract, I'm going to assume that most of these are going to be roll call votes. So we'll start with a roll call vote.
Rebecca Remerson,
Yes.
Dexter Legg,
Yes.
Patrick Ellis,
Yes.
Sherry Ham Garrity,
Yes?
Dr. Mitchell Schulman,
Yes.
Ann Walker,
Yes.
Leslie Stevens,
Yes.
Lisa Sweet.
Yes.
Vote.
Thank you. Next, consideration and approval of property and liability insurance extension.
Okay. We are a member of the Primex pool. In the state of New Hampshire, there are a couple of pools that you can belong to. We're also a member of the local government center pool for health insurance on a citywide basis. But the school department has been an active member of the Primex pool for property and liability insurance and workers' compensation insurance. And we are good for this year. I mean, we already have, this was our previous renewal. But in insurance pools, part of the ability to be able to provide reasonable prices aside from that claims or the cost is a stability in the pool and being able to predict and everything else. So they have asked and put out a request for pool members to ask their boards for a resolution to extend for another 2 years, and offering an additional 5% discount on whatever however we fit into the pool structure on experience for that, in trade for that. I also wanted to point out, and I included in your packet, that we've been working with Primex since I've been here, and we've been able to not only has Primex refined the way they do business, but we've also worked very hard. Patrick has been to at least one of our joint loss management committee meetings. We should be eligible for an additional 2.5% discount based on being able to qualify for what they call their prime program. I included the 10 points in the memo, and we actually are more than halfway finished meeting these without even doing more research. And I think this is a good opportunity with this pool to be able to do that. And I looked at some history here, and, you know, as recent as a couple of years ago, we were at, $150,000, $160,000 a year in property and liability expense, and that was competitive at the time with the other pool. We were able to, through work on Primex's part, through work on our part, we were able to get that down last year to $98,522. This year, there is a 5% increase based on our loss ratios. We did have a decrease in workers' comp, but in the property and liability, it's plus 5%. So we're at 103,376. So I think we have a history here of working well, and I think it's my recommendation that we do extend for the other 2 years so we can continue this partnership and try to keep our rates at a reasonable level. And I think, that history shows that we've been working on it, and we should be able to continue that. So I would request that you consider a resolution to approve an extension through 2012.
Okay, so can we have a motion to
Move
accept?
to approve?
Second.
Seconded. Any questions and further discussion? Stephen, I have one quick question. So basically what you're saying is once we satisfy these 10, we're eligible for an extra 2.5%?
Correct.
Above the 5% already?
That's correct.
Okay.
And we're working very hard to do that. The Joint Loss Management Committee has, even before they came up with this additional discount, been working on a lot of these, and so it should be fairly reasonable to do in the next, the next month to be able to get this, to get at least a half a year, if not 3/4 of a year, of an additional 2.5%.
Okay. Any other questions? I'll take a roll call vote.
Rebecca Emerson,
Yes.
Dexter Legg,
Yes.
Patrick Ellis,
Yes.
Sherry Ham Garrity,
Yes.
Dr. Mitchell Schulman,
Yes.
Ann Walker,
Yes.
Leslie Stevens.
Yes.
Lisa Sweet.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is consideration and approval of transfer of the athletic injury fund to the Futures Program.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for some years, the school department has maintained an athletic injury fund, although for many years, they would pay out when children were injured in athletics up to $500. For some years now, it has remained dormant. The auditors have raised concerns about that, and actually, it has accrued some $48,650. And so it is my recommendation, after council has looked at this, that this money be essentially designated for a future scholarship fund administered by the trustees of the trust funds, because those monies can either go back to the general fund or they can be designated by vote of this board for some other purpose.
Okay. So if we do nothing, then this just goes back into the general.
It remains,
Oh, no, it remains where it is.
currently, it has a little bit of an issue.
Right. The auditors.
Yeah, if I may, the auditors are last year initiated a lot of discussion on it, and it's potentially could end up, if you don't vote to move it to a similar type benefit for students, it could vote to go back to the general fund, and we'd lose the use of it for the students. So I too am on board with the superintendent's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Violet.
In case it.
So we'll entertain a motion to accept the recommendation to transfer the athletic injury fund to the Futures Program. Anyone?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, let's take a vote.
Rebecca Remerson,
Yes.
Dexter Legg,
Yes.
Patrick Ellis,
Yes.
Sherry Ham Garrity,
Yes.
Dr. Mitchell Childman,
Yes.
Ann Walker,
Yes?
Leslie Stevens.
Yes.
Lisa Sweet.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, moving on to new business. Consideration and approval of the Title I tutor pay scale.
Yes, well, as you heard last month, I think, from Joanne Simons about the concern where the Title I tutors have been removed from the paraprofessional bargaining unit, their employees at will. She's had a concern about assuring that we get quality folks to support our young readers, and so she came up with a competitive pay scale that would allow, and I think you looked at that last month, to remain competitive with neighboring districts, and that they would follow, for fringe benefit purposes, the paraprofessional contract. But you would establish that new pay scale by virtue of a vote this evening.
Very good. Okay, motion, I would entertain a motion to accept the recommendation for the new pay scale for Title I tutors.
Move to approve the 2-to-1 pay scale for 2009 and 10.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, seeing none, take a roll call.
Rebecca Remerson,
Yes.
Dexter Legg,
Yes.
Patrick Ellis,
Yes.
Sherry Ham Garrity,
Yes.
Dr. Mitchell Childman,
Yes.
Ann Walker,
Yes.
Leslie Stevens,
Yes.
Lisa Sweet.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Moving on to the consideration and approval of a commemorative plaque to the Portsmouth High School press box honoring Mr. Dwayne Frank. A little information on that?
Yes, as you recall, at the last meeting, Board Member LePage had suggested during a recent quarterback club meeting, it was announced that Dwayne Frank would no longer be announcing the football games due to some health issues. However, in recognition of his years of service to the PHS football program, they were hopeful to, at the opening day, although the press box will not be available for opening day, but sometime shortly thereafter, they could basically affix a commemorative plaque for his many years of service to the football program.
Stephen?
Just one point of clarification is that the new press box wouldn't be available for the first one. The existing press box will be available for.
Yes.
Okay,
And the new one won't be in for the opening
right,
game.
the new one won't
Right,
be there, but the
absolutely.
plaque would be affixed to the new one.
That's correct. If I said otherwise, I apologize for
The
that.
old one's still there, and we're going to make it work until the new one can get put up, and that involves a delivery from a manufacturer in another state, a long ways away.
Okay, so a motion to approve the idea of affixing a commemorative plaque.
Move to approve the placement of the plaque.
Second?
Second, any discussion? Okay, I think we can just do a voice vote. So all in favor of accepting?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, consideration and approval of maintenance personnel following the custodial supervisor's contract guidelines. So,
Again, you heard from Attorney Flygar this evening. One of the issues you have, maintenance workers, of whom there are 5 essentially, a security person and 4 who work. They're at-will employees. They have long followed the custodial agreement. The recommendation here is that you align them with the custodial supervisors so that they would essentially get the wages and fringe benefits that are associated with that negotiated agreement.
okay. Thank you. So I would ask for a motion to accept the maintenance personnel. So I can ask Sherry to make a motion.
I'll make the motion to align the maintenance workers with the custodian supervisors union for purposes of compensation and fringe benefits provisions.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote on that.
Yes, Rebecca Remerson,
Yes.
Dexter Legg,
Yes.
Patrick Ellis,
Yes.
Sherry Ham Garrity,
Yes.
Dr. Mitchell Childman,
Yes,
Ann Walker,
Yes.
Leslie Stevens,
Yes.
Lisa Sweet.
Yes.
very good. If I can turn it over to the superintendent to talk about the approval of employment.
Actually, I think
Steve? Sorry.
We have one nomination to bring to you this evening. That is Jamie Costa for the grade 4 one-year position at Dondero Elementary School, replacing Will Purcell, who resigned. Jamie has a master's degree in elementary education from the University of New Hampshire, and most recently was a substitute teacher for us here in Portsmouth.
Move to approve?
Okay, there's a motion to approve.
Second?
Okay, any discussions? Sherry has a question.
I'm sorry, why is it a one-year position?
It's actually filling in for a leave of absence. Will Purcell resigned, but the position is actually shifted for Deb Twombly, who's on a one-year leave of absence.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now I'm confused. Is this a roll call vote on these things? No. Be a voice vote. Thank you, okay. We're just taking so many votes tonight.
Shell show.
Yeah. So, all in favor of accepting?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Okay. And,
There's one more, Mr. Chairman, and that is Phyllis Eldridge, who has worked with the Futures Program for the last 3 years. Essentially, I would like to nominate her to receive a contract to do work for the 09-10 school year.
Move to approve.
Second.
any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. Okay, and last is considering the approval of a policy manual review, which we talked about at our retreat by the New Hampshire School Board Association.
Yeah, so in light of that conversation on August 1st, the New Hampshire School Boards Association, I've had a conversation with their staff attorney, and basically they will review the current manual. They'll provide you a 3 to 5 page written report, where everything from style, formatting, and as well as do an assessment of policies that need to be updated for state or federal purposes. And that's done for a flat fee of $900. And so I would recommend that you permit us to go forward and have that done.
Sounds like a deal.
Absolutely.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Okay, committee reports. Policy Subcommittee.
Okay, we did meet on July 29th, which is in your packet. We did have Susan Burrell there, and we did discuss the acceptable use policy and the personal network device. And we had presented one to you before for a first reading that had a lot of questions and just seemed like we needed Susan back. So she's actually going to take that back to her group and her committee that worked on it, and they're going to try and like really fine tune that into a document that might incorporate both together, or even if it is separate, they're going to be streamlined. And so they're just back working on it, and it will not come back before you probably for a little while. I'm sure school will start up long before you see it again. And we are set to meet again on Tuesday, August 25th. So if there's anything in particular you want us to bring up or discuss. Otherwise, I think because we are in our last motion just approving to have the New Hampshire School Boards overlook our policies, I don't really know what we as a committee might do until we actually get that, so I'm not sure.
Do you have a sense of how long that might take?
Yeah, he said somewhere about 8 weeks, depending on their schedule and what kind of workload they had, so it'll be about 8 weeks.
So is there a reason for us to meet? Is there a reason for that committee to meet before we get that back?
Perhaps not. I mean, you had talked about looking at the facilities use policy and rentals and those and that, but beyond that, there's really no reason, and so you may want to wait.
I did speak to Kathleen tonight about that, and honestly, I meant to have us all talk about that before she left from our previous meeting. So knowing that there are other things we could be working on, and whether or not we really wanted to cancel it, it could go totally either way. So actually, I'm hoping maybe just, Ed, you will speak with Kathleen and see if she really thinks it's productive for us to meet or not, or actually wait for this paperwork to come back from the state.
I'll follow.
Great.
Excellent.
So that's pretty much it for tonight. We have a couple of items listed for the future agenda. We haven't set any dates on this. To have Susan Burrell, Dr. Burrell back for a Lodi survey results conversation. Lodi standing for Level of Technology Integration, which gives us a sort of a sense of where our teachers are and the district as a whole adopting technology and integrating it into the classroom. Sabbatical presentation. So I just want to remind people, if there are other issues on the agenda, on future agendas that you'd like to have discussed, or maybe some report backs on from the administration, you could forward your request to me or and also to the superintendent. That'd be great. Yes.
Joy, it looks like is scheduled to come in September.
Yes, she couldn't make, we had originally intended for her to come this evening,
Okay.
but because of a commitment, she couldn't make it.
Okay. I think that's kind of important to have her come in September because her sabbatical ended, I think, in July. Is that right? End of June.
Okay.
End of June, yes. Yeah.
And I think that there are some things happening as a result of her sabbatical, and I think it would be really helpful to hear about that. And I would really like to know where that all stands. So I'd love to see her come in September.
And I also think, Ms. Emerson, you may have a Safe Routes to School group wanting to come early September as well, as I recall. I know there's a meeting coming up a week from Wednesday,
Yes, a week from Wednesday, central office, 9 a.m. Everyone's welcome.
but I know there were a group of parents who were interested in coming and sharing with the school committee their work
Yep.
and what they have planned as well. So we may have two presentations, actually, to kick things off in September.
I'll bring the
Very nice.
popcorn.
Okay.
Okay. I would just like to suggest maybe this would be a future work session. This came up at our retreat as to explore this new technology. In our case, the schools, some of the classes are exploring with Ning, sort of the social networking. I think it's worth exploring. We talked a little bit about it as a closed system. I see it really more as a way for the school board to have a conversation with itself in public, which is really what a school board meeting is, which is a sort of a conversation amongst ourselves about issues related to the school in public. And I think if we can figure out a way to use this as a closed system so that people, it's only us and we're only talking about issues and conversations about things that we feel we don't have enough time to as we're sitting at the table, I think it might be worth exploring sometime in the future. So I just think we can look into that. Sorry, yes, Sharon.
I'm sorry, last but not least, is usually at our retreat, we schedule our next retreat, and knowing that we did not do that, nor discuss when we were going to meet again, whether it was going to be every 6 months, or as our facilitator said, even if it was going to be 3 times out of the year, or whatever we decide we may want to do as a board. So I would really like people to think that what date would work for them, and whether or not they think we should meet in like 3 months, or should we wait 6 months and then start whatever you think might work for you. But I expect on our next agenda to see some dates or timeframes set up for what we think we should do as a board.
Okay. At least someone's keeping us on track here. Okay. And nothing else?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.